No one knew who the father was, though she was pregnant, in a small, forgotten town where whispers carried more weight than confessions. A child was born unlike any other, the most inbred child ever recorded in American history. This is not a mere tale of genetics or cold science. It's a story woven with dark secrets, veiled in shame, and sealed by generations of silence. Tonight, you're going to step into a hidden chapter of history, a chapter that reveals how deep the roots of desperation, isolation, and forbidden bloodlines can grow. Barely known beyond her dusty front porch, the woman carried a burden heavier than most could imagine. She lived in a community so insular, so detached from the outside world, that outsiders rarely passed through, and if they did, they never stayed for long. Her pregnancy wasn't just a secret. It was a mystery that confounded even the closest neighbors. No man claimed the child, and the whispers that followed her were more chilling than comforting. Some called the child a curse. Others called it a dark consequence of long-buried sins. But what was undeniable was the weight of her isolation, a shadow growing thicker with every passing day. There were no hospital records, no official papers. This child was born in secrecy, the product of a tangled web of bloodlines that intertwined so closely it defied all normal understanding. The community itself was a powder keg of genetic history, place where cousins, siblings, and distant relatives often found their lives crossing in ways the outside world would never accept. Yet, it wasn't just the inbreeding that shocked those who eventually learned the truth. It was the deliberate, almost ritualistic nature of it. This wasn't happenstance. It was the desperate preservation of a bloodline so twisted, no one dared speak of it. But the story does not begin with the woman or her child. It begins generations before, with the slow decay of a family once proud and powerful, now fallen into secrecy and madness. Their legacy became a prison, a claustrophobic nightmare where love was twisted into something unrecognizable, and survival demanded sacrifices most wouldn't fathom. To understand the child's birth, you have to understand the haunting legacy that preceded her. The dark halls of this family's history are filled with whispers of madness, violence, and betrayal. What happened next would push the boundaries of belief, forcing us to confront truths too terrible to name. This is a story not only about blood and bones, but about the shadows cast by silence. It's about the cost of secrets, buried beneath the American soil, secrets that, once unearthed, cannot be ignored. Tonight, you will witness the unraveling of a nightmare hidden in plain sight. The story of a child born from the most inbred lineage ever recorded. A child who carries the weight of an entire community's darkest shame. Prepare yourself to delve deeper into this chilling legacy. The family name had once meant something, on rusted iron gates, in faded letters. It still lingered, a reminder of a time when the land they owned stretched across the hills like a kingdom. But kingdoms fall, and this one didn't go down in fire or war. It rotted from within. The patriarch, a man whose photograph still hung crooked in the hallway of the crumbling estate, believed in purity. Not spiritual purity, not moral purity, but blood purity. To him, lineage wasn't just a matter of pride. It was a weapon, a shield, and eventually, a curse. He married his cousin. So did his sons, and their sons. By the time the woman in our story was born, the family tree had twisted into something grotesque, not branching out, but curling inward, like a dying vine. Choking itself. The town knew, of course. They knew. But in places like this, silence is safer than truth. The people nearby kept their distance. They didn't talk to the family. They didn't visit the home. And they definitely didn't ask questions. The woman's mother had never spoken a full sentence to anyone outside the property line. She was often seen walking the fields alone, barefoot in the frost, humming tuneless melodies that seemed older than language. When she died quietly, without fanfare, the daughter didn't cry. She simply took her place as if it was preordained. Same walk, same silence, same broken gaze that looked past you, not at you. But in this generation, something had changed. Not visibly, not at first. You wouldn't know it by looking at her. But deep in her blood, something ancient and wrong had begun to unravel. The product of generation after generation of genetic collapse was no longer just physical. It had become psychological. What was once hidden now whispered from inside. And when she became pregnant, no one asked. Not the sheriff, not the neighbors, not even the midwife who showed up with 2 trembling hands the night the child was born. They all knew better. They knew that asking meant knowing, and knowing meant you carried a piece of it with you forever. So they pretended. They told themselves maybe it was an outsider, a drifter, a mistake, but in their bones, they knew there was no outsider. There never had been, because that family hadn't let new blood in for over 100 years, and the child she carried wasn't the beginning of something new. It was the final echo of something terrible that should have ended long ago. The child was born in the back room of a house with no electricity, no running water, and no mirrors. The walls were stained with smoke and time, and the air felt heavier than it should have. No one in town ever saw the baby. Not in daylight, not in passing. It was as if the child didn't exist, rumor wrapped in silence. But every so often, you'd hear it. A noise that didn't sound quite right. Not a cry, not a coo, but something between a gasp and a gurgle. Like the world itself wasn't sure what to make of the thing that had entered it. The midwife who delivered the child never returned. She left the property pale and shaking, mumbling about a face that wasn't finished. When pressed, she refused to say more, just stared off into the woods until someone took her hand and led her away. She stopped practicing after that, moved to towns over, and never answered questions again. It's easy to dismiss stories like this, to call them exaggerations or small-town superstition, but medical records do exist. One photocopy, found in a state archive misfiled under a different surname, describes the child as having extreme craniofacial abnormalities, asymmetrical limb development, and a suspected cognitive incapacity beyond standard classification. But the most disturbing detail wasn't what was written, it was what was scratched out. Whole lines redacted in pen, as if someone thought knowing the full truth might be dangerous. And maybe they were right. Children born from severe inbreeding often suffer from genetic disorders. This is a biological reality, but in this case, it wasn't just the child's appearance that disturbed those who encountered her. It was her presence. Something about her made people nervous, unsettled, as if she was absorbing the room without moving. There were no tantrums, no outbursts, just watching, always watching. One visitor swore she saw the girl mimic her every blink, every breath, not out of curiosity, but like she was studying her prey. And still, the townspeople stayed silent. They told themselves it wasn't their problem, that the family was cursed, yes, but contained like rot inside a wall. As long as no one touched it, maybe it wouldn't spread. But secrets like this don't stay buried, especially when they've grown teeth. The child was growing, and soon, keeping her hidden would no longer be enough. As the girl grew older, the house seemed to sink deeper into the earth. Not literally, but in the way that abandoned places do when something unnatural lives inside. The windows were always covered. The doors sealed tight with old chains and rusted locks, not to keep danger out, but to keep something in. No one dared to walk the path past the property anymore. Even hunters, men who feared nothing in the woods, began avoiding the area. They said, the trees near the house stopped growing right. Their bark split open in strange patterns. Animals gave the land a wide berth. The forest itself recoiled, but it was the girl who disturbed the most. She never enrolled in school, never appeared at town events. Yet people reported seeing her at night, standing just beyond the tree line, staring toward the town with eyes too wide to still. One couple swore she was barefoot in the snow, not shivering, just waiting. When they blinked, she was gone. She didn't speak, not in any way that people understood. But the sounds she made, low murmurs, rhythmic hums, animal-like clicking, had a pattern to them. Some said it sounded like a language. Others said it was mimicry, an echo of the voices she had heard through the walls all her life. Either way, the result was the same: unease, even terror. There were stories that the mother had tried to run once, that she'd taken the child into town and begged a doctor for help. But the doctor, after one glance, locked his office and told her never to return. He died 2 months later. A stroke, they said, but some swear he wasn't the same after that day. He couldn't sleep, kept muttering about too much of the same blood in one body. If you're still watching, you're already braver than most. Tell us, in the comments, what would you have done if this was your bloodline? The town eventually reached a silent agreement. They wouldn't go near the house, wouldn't call the authorities, wouldn't ask questions, and in return, they hoped whatever lived inside would stay put. But when something is born from a century of silence, shame, and decay, it doesn't just stay hidden. It festers, it waits, and one day, it learns how to open the door. It happened on a Sunday, the kind of day when the town should have felt safe. Church bells rang, children laughed, windows were open to let the breeze in. But at precisely 2:17 p.m., the bell tower stopped mid-chime. No wind, no birdsong, just a silence so sudden it made the hair on your neck stand up. That's when people say they saw her. She walked down the center of the road barefoot, her hands hanging limp at her sides, fingers twitching like they were being moved by someone else. Her head was tilted slightly, as if she was listening to something far away, or maybe inside herself. Her face was obscured by long black hair. But those who saw her swore she was smiling not with her mouth, but with her eyes. She didn't knock, didn't scream. She simply stood in front of the town's only grocery store and stared through the glass. A boy inside dropped his candy and ran. An older woman crossed herself and whispered, "That's not a child. That's something else wearing a child's skin." The sheriff arrived minutes later. He stepped out of his car slowly, his hand resting on his holster. He asked her name. She didn't answer, just tilted her head again. He said he'd take her home, even offered her a ride. But when he reached for her arm, she let out a sound that no one can quite describe. Not a scream, not a growl, but something deeper, primal. It rattled the windows and dropped the sheriff to his knees. When he looked up, she was gone. She had vanished, not into the woods, not behind a building, just gone. After that, something changed in town. Lights began to flicker. Livestock were found mutilated, with no blood, no tracks. Children started sleepwalking, waking in the middle of fields with no memory of how they got there. One boy drew a picture at school, a girl with black eyes, standing in front of a burning house. When asked who it was, he said, "My sister." He was an only child. The mother. No one saw her again. Some say she died. Others say she's still in the house, locked in a room she can't escape from, whispering prayers that have no God to hear them. Whatever the truth, it no longer mattered. The girl wasn't a secret anymore. She was part of the town now, woven into its silence, its shame. A living curse born not from evil, but from decades of inbreeding, fear, and willful blindness. And something tells me she was only getting started. The town tried to erase her, as if scrubbing history could undo blood. The sheriff's report disappeared. Local papers never mentioned the incident. The store installed new glass and painted over the cracks. Parents told their children it was just a strange dream, that there was no girl, no scream, no shadow walking down the road. But the land remembered. Old barns collapsed without warning. Wells turned sour. Crops failed. The town preacher lost his voice mid-sermon and never spoke again. He later carved a single word into the church pew before vanishing entirely, returned. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all knew what it meant. She hadn't just come to town. She had come back. And the bloodline that spawned her, the one everyone had quietly condemned, but never confronted, had bled into their soil, their minds, their children. Because that's the thing about inbreeding in a closed community. It's not just physical. It's psychological. It breeds patterns, habits, silence passed down like a family heirloom. Over time, no one remembers where the sickness started, only that it must be kept hidden. And so it grows. There were rumors now. Some said she could speak, but only in backward whispers. That she'd been seen near the schoolhouse at night, drawing circles into the dirt with her fingers. A teacher swore she found one of those circles carved into her classroom floor. Though she had locked the door the night before. No signs of a break-in, just that perfect circle, and a single handprint too small to belong to any child currently enrolled. People began moving away. Those who stayed avoided mirrors and doorways after dark. They said they felt watched, not from outside, but from inside their homes. Dreams turned violent. Night terrors. A farmer burned his own fields, claiming the girl had walked through them and the wheat had bowed to her and died. All of this time, the original house, the place where it all began, remained untouched. The doors were shut, the chains still in place, but neighbors noticed something strange. The lights were always on now, and yet there was no power line connecting it to the grid. Whatever had been locked away inside that house for generations wasn't alone anymore. It had taken form. It had learned to walk, to look back, to remind the town and the world that you cannot bury a sin that deep and expect it not to grow. The final chapter of this story isn't written in books or police files. It lives in the mouths of those who speak of her only in whispers, if they speak at all. Most don't. Most have left. The town today is little more than a husk, overgrown and forgotten, with broken roads that lead nowhere and signs so rusted they no longer bear names. The house still stands, and so does she. Those who've dared return are been explorers, thrill seekers, the kind who mock what they don't understand, come back different. The lucky ones never find the house. Their cameras glitch, batteries die, compasses spin. They wander in circles and leave frustrated. But the unlucky ones, they find her. There's footage, a single clip that surfaced online before being wiped. Less than a minute long, just static, then the shape of a girl at the end of a hallway. Pale, unmoving, head tilted sideways, then the sound that same low hum the midwife once heard. Those who watched it claimed to hear it hours afterward, echoing in their homes, inside their heads. One man clawed out his own ears. He's still institutionalized. But here's the part they never tell you. The girl isn't alone anymore. Inbreeding does something to a mind, especially across generations. It blurs boundaries, not just of blood, but of self. Her family didn't just collapse inward genetically. They became one thing, singular thoughts stretched across multiple bodies, like roots from the same poison tree. And the girl, she is the last fruit of that tree. But inside her are all of them. The mother's father, his brother, and the others before them, going back generations. That's why her eyes don't blink like a child's. That's why her silence weighs more than any scream. She carries voices that were never supposed to meet. Thoughts that never had space between them. She is the curse, the punishment, the proof. There is no known name for her. No record, no birth certificate. But in that town, if you can still call it a town, they have a name. They call her the Echo Child, because she doesn't speak for herself. She speaks for all of them. Every secret, every sin, every wrong buried beneath generations of silence and shame. And if you ever hear that low humming in the distance, don't look back. Don't investigate. Don't open the door. Because some bloodlines were never meant to survive. And this one should never have been born at all. They were wrong to think the silence was a barrier. It was a conduit. In the years that followed the girl's appearance on the road, the town didn't just decay. It became porous, like a sponge soaking up the dark energy festering in that house. The Echo Child didn't need to walk the streets again. She had already planted herself inside them. Inside us. It started with the reflections. Old Man Henderson was the first to speak of it, though they found him a week later, drowned in 3 inches of creek water, his eyes scraped raw. He'd told the postman that the girl wasn't in the woods anymore. He said she was in the water, looking up, and not just the creek water. In his morning coffee, in the sheen of a polished spoon, he said every reflective surface had become a porthole, and she was on the other side, watching, her unfinished face pressing against the glass of our world. We thought he'd gone mad, of course. A lonely old man finally succumbing to the town's collective guilt. But then others saw it. A young mother saw the girl standing behind her in a bedroom mirror. Not in the room, but in the mirror itself, her head cocked at that impossible angle. The reflection of the room in the mirror was wrong. Tuthel wallpaper was peeling. The air was thick with the same smoke-stained haze of the old house. The mother shattered the glass, but she says she still sees the girl in her daughter's wide, dark eyes. The town's agreement of silence had been a lock, and the Echo Child was the key. She didn't break the lock. She simply turned it from the inside. The bloodline, you see, had achieved a terrible singularity. Generations of the same DNA, recirculated and concentrated, had done more than create physical deformities or cognitive decline. It had eroded the very space between individual consciousness. They were no longer a family, but a hive. A single, tormented psyche shared across multiple bodies, and now concentrated into one vessel. The girl was not a person. She was a chorus. And the chorus was learning to broadcast. The house, they say, is now a loud silence. If you stand on the overgrown path, just beyond the property line, you don't hear anything. But you feel a vibration, a low, soberal hum that gets inside your teeth, your bones. It's the sound of all their thoughts at once. The sound of a century of shame and twisted love and desperate, claustrophobic existence. Animals don't just avoid it anymore. Birds that fly too close fall from the sky, not dead, but catatonic, their tiny brains overwhelmed by the signal. And the girl, she is no longer confined to the house. She is a pattern. She is the reason old songs played backward on the local radio station before it went off the air for good. She is the face that flashes in your mind the moment before you fall asleep. She is the author of the shared dreams that now bind what's left of the community together, dreams of walking down a long, dark hallway inside a house that breathes, of hands, pale and numerous, reaching out from the walls, not in threat, but in a desperate, lonely need to pull you into the chorus. A team of paranormal investigators came last fall. They had their van, their electromagnetic field meters, their infrared cameras. They were arrogant, laughing about rural ghost stories. They set up for one night. Their footage was recovered. It shows them entering the house, the door swinging open for them, as if invited. The audio picks up the hum, much clearer now, almost a voice forming words just below comprehension. You see them walk through rooms that seem to shift in size, corridors that twist back on themselves. Then, in the master bedroom, they find her. She is not a ghost. She is solid. She sits on the floor, drawing those same perfect circles in the dust. She looks up at them, and for a moment, the camera captures her face. It is both young and ancient, asymmetrical, undeniably wrong, but it is the eyes that stop your heart. They are not one pair of eyes. In the grainy film, they seem to be layered, countless pairs overlapping, all staring out from the same sockets. One of the investigators, a woman, asks, "What are you?" The girl opens her mouth, and a multitude of voices speak at once, a old man's rasp, a young woman's sob, a child's laugh, all woven into that horrific humming harmony. They say a single sentence. We are making more room. The camera drops. The last image is of the ceiling, and the sound is of screaming, not of terror, but of a profound, existential unraveling. The investigators were found the next morning, wandering in the town square. They were physically unharmed, but they were all the same. They had the same vacant stare, the same slight tilt to their heads. When spoken to, they would all hum the same tuneless melody the woman's mother used to sing in the fields. The hive had grown. It had absorbed new members, so we don't try to leave anymore. What would be the point? The soil is poisoned with their blood. The air carries their thoughts. The girl is the heart of it all, a perverse god born of our own silence. This is no longer a story about a cursed family. It is the story of a cursed place, and how the sin of one bloodline can become the damnation of an entire community. The Echo Child does not hate us. She is simply, patiently, weaving us into herself. Because in the end, silence doesn't hide a secret. It just makes everyone a part of it, and soon, there will be no one left to tell the story. There will only be the story itself, living, breathing, and humming in the dark.